We acknowledge that we are streaming to you today from the traditional lands of the Kaurna people. We respect their spiritual relationship with their country.
We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the traditional custodians of the Adelaide region, and we respect that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today.
We extend that respect to all First Nations people watching and sharing with us today. Hi, I'm Sam.
Hi, I'm Ashton.
We are moderators at MOD, which is the Museum of Discovery, and we are a future-focused museum that explores art, science, and innovation.
And right now you are watching Mod TV, which is our latest venture where we're streaming live content directly to your screens 4 days a week. Here at Mod TV, we're engaging with the themes of connection, well-being, and disruption. We're looking deeper into our exhibits, we're hosting games, and much more.
Our current online exhibition at MOD is Life Interrupted, where we're exploring well-being and connectedness in a disrupted world. Today, we want to focus on well-being, and to help us do that, we're pleased to have Jill Dorrian. Professor Jill Dorrian is co-director of the Behaviour-Brain-Body Research Concentration and the Interim Dean of Research at UniSA, Justice and Society.
She has a PhD in psychology, in sleep and chronobiology research, and a Master of Biostatistics. She works in the laboratory and in the field with the Australian Rail, Healthcare and Forestry Industries, investigating fatigue, operational performance, safety and health. Jill's current work is focused on behavioural coping strategies for remaining healthy despite exposure to sleep loss.
In particular, along with colleagues in psychology, nutrition, and activity, she is working in chronobehaviour, investigating the health impacts not only of what we do, but when we do it. Please welcome Professor Jill Dorrian. Hi, Jill.
Hi.
Now, if anyone out there watching has any comments or questions, don't forget to just put it in the stream chat and we'll try and get those to air during the conversation today. So, Jill, welcome. Wonderful to have you on the show. You work in sleep and chronobiology, and the research that you're doing is incredibly relevant to the theme of well-being that we're discussing today. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about how your interest came about and what kind of work you're doing at the moment.
Well, I was very interested in psychology broadly, and I didn't know that having a job as a sleep researcher was even a thing. So I was very excited to find some colleagues that were working in a sleep laboratory. And I was just fascinated by the environment, the types of studies that they were doing. And then in 2006, I was asked to be the scientific expert for a DJ called DJ Primo, and he wanted to break the world record for the world's longest dance party. And that was an amazing experience, but I got to see up close what happens to someone when they stay awake. And one of the things I saw was that after 2 or 3 days, he started to hallucinate. So he thought that the turntables were houses and that the mixer was a street, and that he was moving furniture across the street. And at that point, we became very worried about him, obviously, and we stopped. But this is the incredible effects that sleep loss has on your brain that are very, very obvious. And he didn't have to stay awake for that whole time for us to start seeing these changes. And the other part of it that really got me fascinated was when it got to 3 or 4 in the morning, it didn't matter if it was day 1 or day 2, he still had these really strong impairment happening around this time. So there's a cost to being awake when our bodies are designed to be asleep, and I've been fascinated ever since then.
Wow, how long had he been awake for when he started having those hallucinations?
He stayed awake in total for, I think it was 87.5 hours, but it was sort of the third morning was really when we started to be very concerned. And he had trouble remembering how to DJ. He had some friends that were physically getting his hands and putting them on the records and putting the records on the turntables because he was very impaired. But medically, completely fine. So no problems with blood pressure, hydration, anything like that. So it's very, very strong cognitive effects of sleep loss that are very important.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It was.
So So that was one of the things that kind of sparked your interest early on. What are you working on at the moment?
Well, I guess I'm really interested in people's work hours and the fact that work requires us to stay awake at all times of day, and it extends longer and longer into our day with the, increasing technology moving into our homes and our bedrooms. And so I'm really interested in the impacts of that for performance and safety and those really strong cognitive effects which impact on us negatively way before we start to hallucinate, and what that means for us. And I'm also interested in people that cope with those things really well, and what are the behaviours that keep them safe and healthy, despite the fact that they're working against their biology.
Absolutely. Now, we've had a question come through actually already referring to those hallucinations. I think that's piqued a lot of people's interest. And someone would like to know, what is it that makes that happen? Is it too much of something building up chemically, or what?
Wow, that is super. That is a super good question. I think there's a lot of theories about what's happening. One interesting theory is that when we go to sleep, we have a stage of sleep that we call REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement sleep. And during that stage, we have a lot of dreams. And we know that for some people who are chronically REM sleep deprived, we see hallucinations, and people have suggested that maybe that's REM sleep pressure intruding into the wake state. But we also know that as we fall asleep, we have a lot of things like sleep mentation. So we might have a lot of visual images as we're falling asleep, or we might smell something or feel something, and that's called hypnagogia or hypnagogic reverie. And so it may be that we're starting to sort of dream a little bit as we're falling asleep. And that's happening as we have little micro sleeps through the time that we're awake.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I have heard you speak on that kind of experiment and research before. So, and just in case anyone's wondering out there, they might hear DJs and hallucinations and start to connect some of their own dots. But there were lots of controls in that experiment, wasn't there?
Yes, so he was in a purpose-built venue in Federation Square in Melbourne, and because it was for a Guinness World Record, he did need to be monitored, so he wasn't able to have any drugs except for a little bit of Panadol and caffeine if he wanted to, and that was verified, but that was not true for the people who were dancing on the dance floor.
Yeah, and I know that there had to be people on the dance floor for the whole time. They didn't have to be the same people. Was there anyone in the crowd that you noticed that was there for an extended period of time?
There were a few very, very supportive people on the dance floor that were there for a long period of time, and I wasn't specifically there to watch them, but that also reinforced for me the importance of getting a good sleep.
That makes me think
for
of,
sure.
Jill, I don't know if you saw it, but at the Adelaide Festival, not this year, but last year, they had a work called The Second Woman.
No.
It was a 24-hour theatre work.
Wow.
And the same actor did the same scene over and over again with different men.
Wow.
And I watched 12 hours of it kind of from I think 11 o'clock the night before into the early hours of the morning. And it was really interesting to watch in real time how she started to react to things and coordination deteriorated and all of those things. And Sam, you were part of that project.
Yeah, only one small part at about 4:30 a.m. on in the second day of that. But yeah, the performer has done it, and I think some other performers have done that around the world. And there's lots of examples, I guess, of durational art, durational theatre works, durational sort of performance installations, and it's an interesting field for you to do some research in, Jill. That sounds. Have you kind of, apart from the world record DJ attempt, have you kind of looked at any other durational art forms?
No, that's so interesting though. I would really love to know about the audience response, because of course at 3 or 4 in the morning, we are more emotionally labile. We can't control our emotions as much. And so if we're being hit by something that moves us, we might be inclined to respond more strongly. And that could be really interesting. The only study that I've done that was connected with art was I was a participant in a study, and they put electrodes on us, and then they waited till we were in rapid eye movement sleep, which you can tell by someone's brainwaves, and they woke us up and they asked us to describe our dreams, and then they used those dream descriptions, and artists use those dream descriptions to make art. And it was very interesting. For some reason, I was dreaming about being a ballerina, which is nothing like my daytime life. So it was a very interesting experience.
That is fascinating.
Mm.
So Jill, to go back to some of your current research now, so you're looking at sleep patterns, and I imagine with, you know, jobs that have particularly long hours, shift work perhaps, what's the most challenging aspect for you doing research in that field?
I think the most challenging aspect has to be that when we're talking about sleep and fatigue and safety in the workplace, there's a lot of people that have had experiences where things have gone wrong. And sometimes these things are incidents and accidents where people are very severely injured or even in some cases killed. And this can have an impact on the workplace, but also the community. And so I think the toughest projects are ones where something like that has happened, and then we've come in as fatigue experts to try and help, say, look at fatigue guidelines and fatigue management and improve processes in workplaces.
With those processes, where do workplaces find that most difficult? I imagine it's quite different for each job and the different requirements they have, but what kind of challenges do you face yourself up against in trying to implement those things?
The biggest problem with fatigue is that there's no fatigualizer. So you can't blow into a bag and see whether you're 0.05. The second biggest problem that fatigue presents is that it's not like other sources of impairment in that it comes from your personal behaviours, but it also comes from the workplace. And in 24/7 workplaces where people are required to be awake at night, there is always going to be fatigue. It's nobody's fault. We need to acknowledge it and manage it. And so there's a real problem with treating it like other sources of impairment. It's not like alcohol. It's not like drugs. It's going to be there, and we have to acknowledge it. And the other thing is with fatigue, just because you're tired doesn't automatically mean you need to leave the workplace. And so a lot of the fatigue management we do is in industries where maybe they've got workforce shortages, for example, and they can't just get another person to come in and relieve a very tired worker. So what do we do? What safeguards do we put around it to manage the risk so that that person can still be safe and still do their job, even though we know they're a bit tired?
Absolutely. That makes me think a lot about truck drivers. Because
Yes.
they can't swap with anyone and they have to get a delivery to a certain place by a certain time. It's really challenging.
Yeah, so some of it's looking at work hours, but other things can include journey plans, planned rest stops, whether they have napping facilities in the truck, for example, whether they're going to call into a central work manager every so often to make sure that they're safe on the roads, all those kinds of things.
For sure, and I guess there's some interesting ways we're hearing that industry are taking on your research, and for those of us perhaps who aren't sort of in one of those industries, and also other industries that aren't engaging at the moment, what do you hope that people in those industries take away from what you're doing?
I think the first thing is being able to realise that fatigue is an issue because it's something that in the performance space affects us cognitively. We can get very impaired, but we go to sleep and then it's reversed. And so it's very easy for us to overlook it and not talk about it. And when we talk about health in the broader context, we talk a lot about diet and exercise, things like sun exposure, which is very important for us, alcohol use, tobacco, smoking, but we don't talk about sleep and circadian disruption in that conversation enough. And so I think one of the big things is acknowledging that sleep and rhythms, body rhythms, circadian rhythms are important, that there's a cost when those things get disrupted, and that we need to think about managing those.
I'm having absolute flashbacks to being at uni and doing all-nighters on assignments. And I remember at around like 4 or 5 a.m., not quite hallucinations, but you could tell that something wasn't quite right.
Absolutely. And then when the sun came up, did you start feeling a little bit more awake again?
Actually, yeah, which is probably why I thought it was okay to keep doing.
Exactly. The body rhythms are very, very strong, and the people see the daylight and they start feeling better, but they're still very impaired. And so it's easy for us to underestimate how important these things are.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a lot of things that can trick us. There's a lot of ways that we might not be acknowledging the effect of loss of sleep or shortness of sleep. What's the main thing that you think individuals should be focusing on for better well-being around sleep?
I think right now there's so much going on, and it's a very, very strong recipe for bad sleep. The first thing that people often do when they're having sleep problems is they worry about it, and then that makes the sleep worse. So I think giving ourselves permission during this time to be okay with the fact our sleep is going to be disrupted. We're under a lot of stress. And then maybe thinking a little bit how we might make sure that we're safe. So have we had enough sleep to drive anywhere, although that's a lot less than we would normally at the moment? Do we need a little cup of coffee? And even before we get dangerous, our mood, for example, is going to be really, really affected. And so giving each other that support and allowing people to be a bit grumpy because they're probably not having enough sleep, and just supporting each other a little bit and knowing that our social interactions aren't going to be as smooth as they usually were. And that's completely understandable when we know what tiredness does to the body.
Absolutely. That's a really good way of looking at it. I know that when I'm grumpy, it usually means that I've forgotten to have lunch or I haven't had enough sleep. So
yeah.
So this is so interesting. What else are you and your colleagues working on in this sleep space?
So I think the main things we're working on at the moment are to do with looking at people who've been in shift work for a long period of time. And rather than just documenting how life is difficult for them because of these exposures and what's going wrong in terms of performance and safety, we're actually able to find cohorts of people who've been in shift work for decades and are very healthy and very safe. And so from a psychology perspective, we're interested in what are the behaviours that they're engaging in. Do they have any psych and scientific basis for the fact that they might be useful? And if they are useful and they fit into people's work lives, then can we share those and give everybody an increased chance of being able to cope with these work hours long term? And so this includes a whole bunch of different strategies, everything from what you do when you're at work to supporting your workmates, through to what kind of social support you use outside of the workplace, through to things to do with your sleep, caffeine use, what you eat, when you eat, how much you eat, when you use exercise, whether you have pets, all of those things can make a real difference to how somebody copes with these stresses to do with sleep loss and circadian rhythm disruption.
Interesting. I'd love to pick up on, you've mentioned caffeine a couple of times now.
Mm-hmm.
That can be a real, I've had that debate with people lots of times about how much coffee is good and when you should be drinking it. Do you have any particular thoughts on that?
I think caffeine is something that we know from a lot of studies does boost your performance when you're tired, but you really need to use it strategically. Mm-hmm. If you drink lots of it, you get tolerant, and then you need more and more to get the same bang for your buck. The other thing that's interesting is that studies are looking at chronic use of caffeine across multiple days show that maybe the caffeine has more of a benefit on the first day, but once you push yourself beyond that, you might not have much more of a return on the caffeine use. It's really time to look at other risk management measures and countermeasures. So try and avoid having too much caffeine too regularly so you don't habituate. Try and have it just when you really need it. So maybe if you are coming up to that 4 a.m. period and you really need to drive home from uni because you've been studying all night, think about using caffeine to help you get through that drive safely, but don't load up on caffeine as soon as you get to uni and keep drinking coffees all the way through. That's probably not a good strategy. And having too much, of course, can make you feel anxious and it can impact negatively on your next sleep period. So thinking about that as well. We usually say try and avoid having caffeine within 4 hours of bedtime, but people know that if they're very sensitive, maybe they need to have a bigger window than that.
For sure, for sure. And if I can just be a little bit selfish, Jill. Now, I noticed in your bio that you work with the rail industry a little bit. I live on a train line, and there's night works at the moment, and they're doing some really noisy stuff from like 7 p.m. until 2 or 3 in the morning. So if you could have a chat to them, that'd be great. But
Done.
if
No
not,
problem.
yeah, excellent. Thanks. But also for myself and anyone else out there who, is struggling, like you've touched on with a good night's sleep at the moment, are there any proven tricks to help you get into that mode of getting a really good sleep?
I guess most of those things come under the general banner of sleep hygiene. So making sure that you've got a safe space to sleep, and that's not trivial. So there's a lot of people that don't have that. And ideally, your sleeping space would be cool, dark, and quiet. So between 18 and 24 degrees is really good for sleep. Body temperature and sleep are very closely linked, and so that temperature is important. Sound, of course, if you've got people working on the railway next to your house in the middle of the night, it's going to be very difficult for you to sleep. But a lot of people use things like white noise or maybe earplugs, and that can really help. And then dark is really important. So if you're someone that needs to sleep during the day, they've done some studies with shift workers, and all they did was went into their rooms and stuck black plastic on the windows, and they improved their sleep an awful lot. So the sleep environment is really important. And then trying to avoid having associations between other things and your sleep environment that aren't connected with sleep or intimacy. So try not to take your devices into the bedroom, try not to take your work on your laptop into bed, and have that separation. And the other thing that's really nice is if you have a set bedtime routine or ritual, so that as soon as you start it, your body knows it's time to wind down, and you're using all of that great classical conditioning evidence to get your body primed for going to sleep when you finally get there.
Excellent. That's great. I'm going to implement all of them. That's excellent.
Great.
And if people are interested in finding out more, perhaps about the study of sleep and all the areas of your research, where would you suggest that they look?
I think the best place would be if you want to follow me on Twitter at Jill Dorrian. If you're interested in anything to do with sleep in general, the Sleep Health Foundation has a fantastic website, sleephealthfoundation.org, and they have a lot of fact sheets, and they will tell you about just about anything to do with sleep that you could care to know.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jill. We've loved chatting with you this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.
Oh, so many useful things. I have quite poor sleep hygiene. I think I need to implement some kind of routine. So I'm going to take lots of those tips on board.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think like we both work in performing arts, which at times means we're working through to sort of midnight on a regular basis, but then also rehearsing during the day on a normal 9 to 5 or 10 to 4. That's kind of the actors' hours. But yeah, so it's interesting. I similarly have a bad sleep hygiene, I think. Yeah, so I think I'm going to try, especially at the moment, while I can choose what I do in the evening, and my evenings are my own. I think I'll try and get into a good routine with that. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's really interesting as well, thinking about maintaining the bedroom as a sacred sleep space, because I'm just thinking back to all the share houses I've lived in, where you've got that one room, so your bed's in there, your desk is in there, and I used to hate that feeling of waking up and the first thing I saw was a big pile of all the work that I needed to do.
Yeah, and it's also even just the laundry basket. Like sometimes that just gets piled up. It's like, so yeah, sometimes, I have found it. Move the laundry basket somewhere else, maybe in the bathroom or in the laundry if you're luxurious enough to have a separate laundry room. It's interesting about kind of just honoring that space that is a sleep space, and also I think a good quality bed can help, or mattress. I know it's only a certain point in your life when that kind of gets towards the top of the priority list, and because it can cost a lot. But yeah, I guess it's hopefully something that you're in 8 hours a day. And it's kind of good to kind of honor that. I think I'd rather have a small TV, really crappy TV and a good mattress, than the other way around. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I knew I was getting older when I started prioritizing my bamboo memory foam pillow. I was like, oh, it's happened. I'm getting older. I need a good pillow.
And just for reference, other pillow types are available and
absolutely, and I'm
equally endorsed.
I'm not getting paid by Big Bamboo Memory Foam to do this broadcast.
That was great. Yeah, so I think there's some work to be done to get a good night's sleep, but this could be the beginning. And what an interesting area of research. I think you can go from researching just regular people's sleep into specific industries' sleep, and then you can step in and assist with a world record attempt. Amazing.
Yeah, I was not expecting that. That was incredible.